Fustamai, welcome to episode 4 of Responders, this week focusing on the Isle of Man Ambulance Service and St John Ambulance. We'll also be speaking to some of the people up at the Emergency Services Joint Control Room. Lots to squeeze in tonight, so let's start by heading down to Douglas Ambulance Station, where I spoke to paramedic Jason ahead of his shift.
Today we're going to go on 112. It's one of the more modern vehicles. They're all kitted out exactly the same, but we still do have our favourites. What we generally do is we have the keys in a locked safe in a locked building, because vehicle security, wherever you are, is absolutely paramount. We don't keep any controlled drugs on board all the time. In the UK, vehicle thefts are a problem. If you're working around central London, they're always concerned about having an ambulance stolen and being utilised as a terrorist vehicle. So we take vehicle security exceptionally seriously. So ambulance, a French word for a mobile hospital. We really do bring the care to the community with the kit that we carry now. We'll just have a general walk round. Me and my crewmate, we swap round, so she does half the day driving, so we both get to sort of keep on top of our skills with driving and with dealing with patients as well. One of the big differences between these and a UK vehicle, the UK vehicles, a lot of them are van conversions, which are cheaper, but you don't have as much room, and they're generally on a Fiat cab that brings its own inherent problems as well. Whereas these are on a Mercedes cab. Quite a lot of the ambulance services in the UK still like using the Mercedes because they've been a very safe and stable platform and a good reliable platform. The only different thing that you'll find between this and a UK vehicle that we are at a slight disadvantage to, in a UK vehicle you'd have what's called an MDT, a mobile data terminal. So effectively your job comes through to you and the mapping is already instantaneously plotted on your vehicle. We don't have that system here, unfortunately. That's one of the few downsides of these vehicles.
What does happen if you don't know where you're going? Well, generally, does that not happen between you?
I'd like to say no, but ultimately, when you get places down in the south of the island, where there's sometimes, for instance, 5 Bayview cottages, it's difficult to get to the right one. Yeah. And when time's critical, that can cause problems. Most of the time we get it right, but unfortunately it does happen where we can't find addresses. It does take a little bit of time to get used to, especially if you're sort of new to the island, but you soon get to grips with that as well. These vehicles, when we get into the back of the vehicles, are stocked exceptionally better than what you would get in a UK vehicle. So there we have what's called a Lucas device, which is a mechanical compressions, so for doing mechanical CPR.
And will you use it quite often, or is it a rarity to have to get it out?
No, on a cardiac arrest situation that comes out on every job, and it frees up a pair of hands, because regardless of how fit or healthy we are, generally you can only do CPR effectively for up to about 2 minutes. This machine does it indefinitely. The main priority for us is that if we are moving a cardiac arrest patient in the back of the vehicle, staff don't need to be standing up. Staff can be sat down, they can be strapped in, they can be concentrating on doing the drug therapies or their airway management. So in this cupboard, we've got our RTC helmets there for safety at the side of a car crash, or if we're working on the side where there's potentially rockfall. We've also got high-vis jackets that are personal issue, that they'll be in the front in a moment. Above that, I'll get that bag out. My crewmate's going to be mad with me because we'll break the tag. If you notice there, we've got a little tag. And that tag is to symbolise that the vehicle is ready and operationally ready to go. So we don't need to check this bag because we know it's tagged, and I know that tag will conform with a piece of paper that we've got in the vehicle as well. And this is what we call our advanced life support bag. And when we talk about ALS, when we go to a cardiac arrest, we'll deliver the same services that you get in an A&E department. So here we go. This is the back of the ambulance. Very similar to what you see on TV.
So there's 3 seats in the back here, plus the stretcher.
Yeah. Not all patients go on the stretcher. Most people historically would go on the stretcher, but now if people can walk and people can mobilise, we will always sit them in a seat, and we'll always sit them facing forwards. People get less sick and they get a better journey then.
You do work with the North West Ambulance Service too, is that right?
Yes. I have a bank contract with NWAS, as I've got family over there. My main employment is here. I've been here for 5.5 years, but pre-COVID, I would commute back each week. I would see my children, and then I would come back and do my shifts here. Our vehicles are kitted out much better than what you would get across. There are some good systems that NWAS have.
Is that North West Ambulance?
Yeah, North West Ambulance. So there's a thing called Manchester Triage, MTS, which is a process of safely triaging patients that doesn't always end in an ambulance transporting. So patients that are safe to make their own way into hospital, after they've been clinically assessed by a paramedic, some patients we would advise them to make their own way to hospital, or we'd advise them onto other healthcare professionals such as GPs, and that they would make their own way there rather than tying up an ambulance for a non-critical job. And we're just in the process of implementing that now here as a service.
What about how busy the services are?
To be fair, the service here is on par, busy-wise, per head, than what you would get working in Blackpool. I'm going to book on in a minute, and I can pretty much guarantee today that we'll be job to job to job to job all day. And, if we've not done 8 jobs in 12 hours, I'd be surprised.
In May last year, Tynwald approved all 26 recommendations in Sir Jonathan Michael's review of health and social care services in the island. The report suggested separating delivery and governance of health services through creation of an arm's-length body, Manx Care. This is on track, but what does it mean for the ambulance service? I spoke to Head of the Service Steve Crowe and Senior Paramedic Sean Crellin.
The Sir Jonathan Michael review is obviously in preparation for setting out transformation, looking at the whole of the Department of Health and Social Care. Them recommendations were accepted by Tynwald, and what we're doing now behind the scenes is actually aligning ourselves. Manx Care will be the arm's length body which will be the provider of care overseen by the sort of government. The paramedic role itself is changing rapidly. Traditionally, paramedics sort of in the mid-80s were trained, and they were trained in specific skills, usually around airway, breathing and circulation. Now you'll hear terminology such as advanced paramedic. So we see paramedics extending their skills out, taking on some of the nursing roles. For us going forward, integration and integrating our services to make sure that the care is wrapped around the patient is absolutely integral to the ambulance service. So we're looking forward to transformation because it will modernise our service as well. We already have paramedics working within the med system. It's common practice now for, again, paramedics to work in prison health service. So the gaps are closing really, and what we're after is people working right at the top of their pay grade, pushing boundaries, and that's where we see our development. As I said before, we're really looking forward to transformation to modernise us.
One of the other things we keep hearing from the sort of central government or the Department of Health and Social Care is this sort of focus on mental health as well as physical health. How much of what you are attending is based on mental health?
We do unfortunately have to attend quite a lot of mental health cases during the year. I've got some figures here actually. Last year we attended 230 separate cases where our staff have to use their multiple sort of dynamic skills of dealing with mental health illness. Lately we've had a lot of help indirectly through the police and the mental health service, where they have a mental health professional who is available to assist our staff and also mainly assist the patient, and we've utilised them on quite a few occasions, and we're starting to get quite a good working relationship with the mental health professionals. We're not highly trained in mental health treatment. We have to know a lot about a lot of things, and the in-depth knowledge is a difficult area for everyone, and including it's shown nationally through the UK. It's one of the biggest problems we have lately, and it's growing all the time. I think with the COVID situation this year, it has heightened the numbers that we see, and like I said to you, we have some great help from the mental health professionals on the island. And we're working towards more integrated care packages and information for our staff to help everyone deal with these situations.
What would be the busiest sort of call category that comes into the ambulance teams?
I think probably falls is one of them. Elderly related illnesses and injuries from falling is one of our biggest categories on here. I think that unless we've got nearly 2,000 cases in 2019, and when we're there, we don't just pick them up and put them back in a chair and leave. We put things in place for them with falls specialists, their GP, re-enablement teams, occupational therapy, so that from one person falling, there's then a cascade of help, if you like, for that individual.
Now, we can't not talk about COVID. How did the work of the ambulance service change at all during that time?
Massively. As soon as we sort of seen it coming, the senior management team had some really good working processes in place and developed very quickly a policy that to protect the staff and the patients out on the streets, if you like. We implemented and purchased the PPE far beyond a lot of other services in the UK, so we're very proud of what we were able to achieve and the speed in which it was done. So before we even got our first case on the island, we were pretty much ready to go, and from that point onwards the staff had all the training for PPE. As much as it was a nervous time for everyone, the first time you go to a potential case, everyone got into the groove and everyone worked really hard and really diligently and safely, which was really good for us.
Would you say you were overwhelmed? Did you have enough people involved over the pandemic?
I think we had enough staff on the ground. What really challenged us was the infection prevention and control side of things. So every time a patient met the criteria for potential COVID, that ambulance then required a deep clean, and by deep clean it means everything stripped out, the ceiling cleaned, the walls, all the equipment washed down, with staff in protective equipment. Basically we didn't have the staff to do that, so we employed a contract company in to do some cleaning, and they rallied round. And we also then put the call out through civil defence, retired firemen, and just people off the street who came, and that was coordinated by Carolyn Kinraid from the Motorsport Development Team and John. They worked together to pull the volunteers to provide us a rota for ambulance restockers. You know, some were working more than full-time hours for us during that period, and extremely grateful for them. And in fact, so much so that we won't be going backwards. That team now, we've been very successful in the business case, and the Make Ready centre operation will be, we hope to have that up and running shortly. At the moment we're recruiting staff into them roles, and we hope to be up and running by sort of November time.
The government ambulance service is supported by several charities on the island, including the Rob Vine Fund, Russian Emergency Ambulance and St John Ambulance. I went to St John Ambulance to speak to some of the team about the services they provide.
I'm Kat and I'm the Public Duty Administrator.
Hiya, I'm Dan. I'm a community first responder and I also work full-time on the Urgent Transport Service.
Phil Bennett, Commercial Training and Marketing Manager.
I'm Mike Ryan and I'm a youth leader.
What sorts of youth work does St John Ambulance do?
You're looking from 5 years all the way up until your last years. 5 to 10 we've got our badgers, which is really good, get some around that school starting age. And then from 10 to 18, we have our cadets. But we also have a crossover from 16 to 25, which is a fortnightly attendance thing. Has some recognisable national qualifications involved in it as well. And we also have then, obviously, adults from 18 up.
That's really good. And how long has this sort of thing been going on? Is it quite long? Would there be people now, adults, who've come through it?
Yeah, exactly.
Phil's waving his hand.
Yeah, I've been in St John for 50 years, joined as a cadet, but the actual youth movement started in about 1922.
Oh wow, so when you're a cadet at St John Ambulance, you're literally learning how to be a first responder, that sort of thing?
You're learning life skills, so not only first aid is taught, but other life skills as well.
Phil, you said that you're involved with some of the training that goes on up here.
We offer a range of courses from first aid, so they can do emergency first aid at work, full first aid at work course, but we also do a lot of health and safety stuff as well. So we've got IOSH training, which is managing safely, working safely. We do fire marshal courses, and recently we've started doing mental health first aid, and that's been very, very successful for us. It's a 2-day course where people learn what to do, deal with issues in the workplace. So it's not sticking a stick and plaster on, but it's more like signposting people where they can get help and things like that.
Now, Dan, you said you were part of the first responder team. Tell us what the first responders do.
So the community first responders are volunteers that live out in the community across the island, and we respond to urgent calls where an ambulance might be taking a while to get there, or it's the sort of call where really seconds matter, so things like cardiac arrests, those sort of calls where seconds really can make a difference. So people just with everyday jobs sort of just go about their sort of stuff, and they're called out of work, some people, and some people do it in their spare time. So I started that with Russian Ambulance in the south of the island in 2008. And down there we've got 6 volunteers that do 24-hour cover. But the scheme is organised island-wide by St John Ambulance, and they do all the training. So all the training is standardised across the island, so everyone has the same skill set. But like I said, it's the higher sort of priority calls, cardiac arrest, fits, choking, those kind of things, serious bleeding. Sometimes we might get sent to a fall where they're not sure why the person, it comes in as a fall, but sometimes cardiac arrests can look like falls, it depends. So if they're not sure, we'll get sent to those as well, just to sort of try and get more information for the control room.
Presumably it requires less training than to become a sort of full-time paramedic.
Yes, it does, yeah. So it's a couple of weekends. The training is very detailed, but it's not very broad. So because there's only certain categories of calls you'll get sent to, we know very well how to manage sort of cardiac arrests in the first few sort of minutes and those kinds of calls. But things like, somebody who's just generally unwell and might need sort of more of a medical intervention, we're not so so trained in.
So this is a good example of how St John Ambulance really does support the work of the government's ambulance service. You also talked about the patient transfer there.
Yeah, so the urgent transport service.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's a patient transfer service that sort of bus fanning will do, taking people to and from hospital appointments. And then the sort of next level up from that is the urgent transport service. And we deal with things that a little bit more time critical, things like GPs admissions into hospital, the air ambulance transfers between Nobles and Ronalds Way, and poorly patients who might need a little bit of monitoring, a little bit of oxygen en route. So it's a little bit of a step up from patient transport. And also end-of-life care, taking people for end-of-life care, which is a privilege to be involved, really, emotionally charged events, really.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dan. Now, we've also got Kat.
I'm the Public Duties Administrator, and that is essentially offence across the Isle of Man need first aid cover, so we cover a lot of them, and my job is to try and get the volunteers to take their time off, and come in, help us. They're all trained up, so from first aider to be able to crew ambulances, and we get them out on these different events across the Isle of Man. And we're very busy at the moment, so which has been nice since it got a bit quiet over COVID.
It did. We'll talk a little bit about the pandemic in a minute. You say it's been busy. Is it ever difficult to get volunteers to come out to the events? Are people ever reluctant?
It's not so much they're reluctant. At the end of the day, they're volunteers, so they have their own life. They've got their own families and that. And certainly, like over the Super Manx weekend, we had 16 events on, and that was ranging from just getting a grab bag, having a few first aiders, all the way to crewing ambulances, and on top of that, helping the Isle of Man ambulance service as well in the overnight. And so trying to get all these volunteers to be working on their long weekend off.
Yeah, well, let's focus on the COVID pandemic now then.
Yes, so my job changed lots, basically, because there was lots of cancellations, so I was having to deal with that side. But then we took on the role of offering with all the different pharmacies across the Isle of Man. It was supposed to start with the independent ones, but it became, out of the 23 pharmacies, we looked after 18 of them with our volunteers going out, just delivering the prescriptions across the island. But we also ended up helping oncology up at Nobles, and we delivered those prescriptions as well, 6 days a week.
Now, to finish this series, let's head up to the Emergency Services Joint Control Room. Howard Jones is the Operations Manager.
We have a joint control room now, as opposed to 3 separate control rooms that we had in the past. This started in April 2004, and it's manned by civilian operators who deal with all the 999 calls for all the emergency services on the island. So as you dial that last digit of the 9, it comes straight through to us. We answer your call, and we take all the details and dispatch it of the appropriate resource back out.
And so how many people work up here?
So I've got 5 shifts of 5 people working 365 days a year, 24/7 in the control room.
It's a joint control room. What benefits does that bring rather than having the three separate in different places?
Well, I think the Isle of Man all those years ago was very innovative and very brave to actually go with that, and it's turned out to be an excellent choice. The advantages of that are that we have a multi-service response that is required. Then all three services get the same information at the same time, and we can dispatch and ask the right questions so all the resources arrive on the scene. This particularly is an advantage when we have a major RTC, road traffic collision, where people are trapped and injured. We can deploy and get the right resources there very quickly indeed.
Roughly how many calls would come in to the control room?
Going on to last month's calls, we had 999 calls, 2,760 come into the control room. All of these calls are answered on average within 1.6 seconds last month.
My name's Damien Dunn and I'm the IT officer. This is our switch room. All the workstations and screens you've seen upstairs is run by all the servers downstairs. That means the telephone system that Manx Telecom use.
So it's your job to keep it all going?
Yes, there's 4 of us in the engineering department. We do the police, fire and ambulance as well. Also, we have a recording system that everything that comes in from outside is recorded, radio and telephone calls, and we can pull off any of the recordings for court, and we also do that as well. We do the fire service paging as well, and we've 27 towers, you know, the masts outside. Yeah. That is the radio system around the island. We also climb the masts and change the aerials and stuff like that.
Does it ever go wrong?
Now and again. We used to have like your Sky, used to go above ground on the masts, but now most of the signals are underground with fibre. Previous to that, the weather had a big issue on it. If it was raining, the signal would fade out and you'd have issues with your radios. But now, since we got the upgraded system, it's much, much better.
Adam is a call handler. So what sorts of things can you see on your screen when you're trying, on your screens? You've got 5 in front of you.
We've got 3 main screens at the moment. So we've got one for the mapping. We've got one which shows the jobs that are currently coming in. So if somebody types a job, we can all see them on the bottom of our screen in a pending tab, and that's for all 3 services: police, fire, ambulance. The third screen is all the units that we actually have available to us at the moment for all 3 services. With the ambulance jobs, they'll come in. We can see here under the agency that it's an ambulance one. From that point, we can look at what we have available, so we can start deciding who we're going to be dispatching to that.
So is there a pressure to get things sorted out quickly when you get the call that's coming through?
Depending on the call, because there's no filter before the calls come here. All 999 calls come through to us, so the first thing we need to determine is whether that person needs police, fire, ambulance assistance, and take it from there. So with something like an RTC, a road traffic collision, if you've got a vehicle that's rolled and a person trapped, you know at that point that you're going to be needing all 3 services at once. So you've got to be getting information to be able to update all 3 at once. So you're changing hats fairly quick just to try and get all the information and make sure everyone's updated whilst they're en route.
And does it often get too busy and you've got to sort of take vehicles off jobs that they're on, or are we pretty well staffed?
It depends on the seriousness of what is coming in, because that's more pertinent with the ambulance. They're all categorised from 1 through to 5, depending on the answers given to the questions. Yeah. A category 1, for example, that would be somebody that is in cardiac arrest, needs immediate attention. Category 5 might be something a bit lower level. They might have fallen over, not injured. Yeah. Just need somebody to check them over to make sure that they are okay. So we've got response times as to when that needs to be happening. So a category 1 needs to be going immediate, so we need to be getting the crews going within less than a minute and a half, but we do try and push that to less than 30 seconds. If we see a Category 1 come in, the first priority will be to get them moving.
Call handler Adam there. That's it for Responders. You can listen back to the whole series under the podcast page at manxradio.com and clicking the picture of the Laxey wheel. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.